You're not rich enough for me. The sentence lands sharp and clean, cutting through the soft jazz and clinking glasses like it doesn't belong in a place this polished. Ethan Cole doesn't react right away. He just sits there, fingers loosely wrapped around a glass of water he hasn't touched, watching the woman across from him gather her purse without even finishing her drink. Around them, people pretend not to stare, but their silence says enough. It's the 20th time. 20 blind dates. 20 polite smiles that turned into quiet judgment. 20 moments where his worn jacket, his simple watch, his lack of flashy confidence became the deciding factor before he could even finish a sentence. The woman stands, smooths her dress, and gives him one last look. Dismissive, practiced. You seem nice, she adds, almost as an afterthought. But I'm not looking for this. She gestures vaguely at him, at his clothes, at everything he chose not to display. Then she walks away. Ethan exhales slowly, leaning back in his chair as the weight of the moment settles in. Not anger. Not even embarrassment anymore. Just clarity. He glances at his reflection in the window beside him. The city lights of Manhattan stretching endlessly behind his silhouette, the glass turning him into a stranger in his own world. For a second, the version of himself people expect flickers in his mind. Tailored suits, black cars, penthouse views, a name that opens doors before he even knocks. But tonight, like the 19 nights before, he chose to leave all of that behind. No introductions. No last name. No safety net of wealth. Just Ethan. And apparently, just Ethan isn't enough. He drops a few bills on the table, more than enough to cover both meals, and stands. The hostess gives him a polite nod, the kind reserved for guests who are forgettable. Outside, the cold air hits harder than he expects, sharp against his skin, grounding. Traffic hums along Fifth Avenue, headlights streaking past, like time refusing to slow down for anyone. He pulls his jacket tighter, not because it's cold, but because for the first time, the experiment feels heavier than he planned. 20 times. 20 women who saw him and decided within seconds that he wasn't worth staying for. Not worth knowing. Not worth the risk. He lets out a quiet laugh, shaking his head as he steps away from the glow of the restaurant and into the dimmer stretch of the street. Maybe they're right, he murmurs under his breath. But even as the words leave him, something in his chest resists. Because he knows the truth they never saw. The truth sitting quietly behind the version of him they dismissed. Ethan Cole isn't just another guy in a worn jacket. He's the man whose name sits on the top floor of a glass tower 3 blocks away. The man whose decisions move millions of dollars before breakfast. The man who could have walked into that restaurant in a suit and left with a yes before dessert. But that's exactly the problem. He doesn't want a yes that belongs to his money. He wants the kind that belongs to him. He stops at the edge of the sidewalk, watching as a black car slows slightly nearby, as if waiting for him. He ignores it. Not tonight. Not yet. Instead, he reaches into his pocket and pulls out a folded note. Creased, worn from being opened too many times. On it, just a single line he wrote to himself weeks ago. Find someone who sees you before they see your status. He stares at it for a moment, then folds it back carefully. 20 tries. 20 failures. Most people would stop. Most people would go back to the easier version of life, where everything is handed to them and nothing is questioned. But Ethan doesn't move. Instead, he looks up, eyes scanning the city like he's searching for something that hasn't appeared yet. One more, he says quietly. Not out of desperation. Not out of hope. Out of decision. One more chance to prove that somewhere in a world that measures everything in dollars and appearances, there's still someone who chooses differently. The next morning, the skyline fades behind him as the city turns into highways, and highways into open land. The buildings shrink, replaced by long stretches of road, rusted signs, and sky that feels too wide to belong to the same world he left behind. Hours later, the car he finally agreed to ride in slows near a small mining town. Dust in the air, trucks lined along the road, people moving with purpose instead of pretense. It's quieter here, rougher, real. Ethan steps out, shoes hitting gravel instead of polished marble, the sound unfamiliar but oddly grounding. He adjusts his jacket, glancing around as if trying to memorize every detail. This place doesn't care who he is, doesn't recognize his name, and for the first time in weeks, that feels like an advantage. Somewhere in this town, he tells himself, is the answer to the question he hasn't been able to solve. not in boardrooms, not in luxury restaurants, but here, where nothing is polished and everything is earned. He takes a step forward, unaware that just a few yards away, a girl with coal-stained hands and steady eyes is about to change everything he thought he knew about being seen. You ever been underground before? The voice comes from his left, steady and low, cutting through the rumble of distant machinery. Ethan turns, and that is when he sees her for the first time. Lily Carter stands a few feet away, one hand resting on her hip, the other holding a worn metal lunch pail. Her face is smudged with coal dust, not enough to hide the sharpness of her features, but enough to tell a story without words. Her eyes do not linger on his clothes, or his shoes, or the fact that he clearly does not belong here. They just meet his, direct and unfiltered. Ethan blinks once, caught off guard by the absence of judgment. Not yet, he answers, his voice quieter than he expected. Lily nods slightly, as if that tells her everything she needs to know. You look like you might get lost down there, she says, not unkindly, just honest. There is a hint of humor in it, but no edge. Ethan lets out a small breath that almost turns into a laugh. That obvious? She shrugs, shifting her weight. This place does not get many visitors who still have clean hands. For a moment, neither of them speaks. Around them, the town moves at its own rhythm. Trucks roll past, kicking up dust. A group of workers in heavy boots and reflective vests head toward the mine entrance, their voices blending into the background like a constant hum. The air smells faintly of metal and earth, a stark contrast to the polished scent of city streets Ethan left behind. He notices how Lily stands differently from everyone else. Not rushed, not trying to impress, just present. It unsettles him in a way he cannot explain. I am Ethan, he says finally, offering his hand out of habit. Lily looks at it for a second, then back at him. Instead of shaking it, she gives a small nod. Lily, no apology, no explanation, just a boundary, quiet and firm. Ethan lowers his hand, strangely relieved. There is no script here, no expectations he has to meet. So what brings you here, Ethan? She asks, tilting her head slightly. The question is simple, but it lands heavier than it should. He could say business. He could say exploration. He could say anything that sounds reasonable. Instead, he hears himself answer with the truth, or at least part of it. I am looking for something real. Lily studies him for a moment, her gaze steady but not invasive. Then she lets out a soft breath through her nose, almost like she is amused. You picked an interesting place to look, she says. Real is not always easy out here. Ethan nods, glancing past her toward the mine entrance where darkness stretches beneath the earth. I'm starting to figure that out. A faint smile touches the corner of her lips, gone almost as quickly as it appears. She adjusts her grip on the lunch pail, then gestures toward a nearby bench made of worn wood. You eaten yet? The question catches him off guard. In the city, meals are scheduled, planned, served with precision. Here, it sounds like something simpler. More human. Not really, he admits. Lily sets the lunch pail down and flips it open, revealing a sandwich wrapped in paper and a small container of something that smells faintly of spices. She hesitates for half a second, then tears the sandwich in half and holds one piece out toward him. It is not fancy, she says, but it will keep you standing. Ethan looks at the food, then at her. No hesitation, no calculation, just an offer. He takes it slowly, almost carefully, like accepting something more than just a meal. Thank you, he says, and for once, the words feel like they carry weight. They sit side by side on the bench, the wood creaking slightly beneath them. The silence that follows is not awkward. It is steady, like the rhythm of the town itself. Ethan takes a bite, surprised at how good it tastes. Not because of the ingredients, but because of the moment. Lily watches him out of the corner of her eye, then looks away toward the horizon. You do not talk like someone from around here, she says after a while. And you do not eat like it either. Ethan smiles faintly, wiping his hands on a napkin she hands him without looking. I will take that as a learning curve. She lets out a quiet laugh, the sound soft but genuine. You might need more than that. A truck rumbles past, and a man steps out, calling Lily's name. His tone carries authority, but there is something else beneath it, something dismissive. Lily stands, her posture straightening slightly. That is my shift, she says, closing the lunch pail. She pauses, then looks back at Ethan. You planning to stay long? The question hangs in the air, Simple, but loaded with possibility. Ethan considers it for a second, then nods. Long enough to find what I came for. Lily studies him again, as if weighing something she has not said out loud. Then she gives a small nod, almost to herself. Well, she says, brushing her hands against her jeans, leaving faint streaks of dust behind. If you are still here after my shift, maybe you can tell me if you found it. She turns to leave, taking a few steps before stopping and glancing back over her shoulder. And Ethan? He looks up. Do not get lost down there. Some people go in looking for something and forget how to come back out. With that, she walks toward the mine entrance, disappearing gradually into the movement of workers and dust. Ethan remains on the bench, the half sandwich still in his hand, watching the place where she stood just moments ago. For the first time since he started this journey, something shifts inside him. Not certainty, not answers, just a quiet, unfamiliar feeling that maybe, just maybe, he is closer than he thinks. The hours stretch longer than Ethan expects, the sun climbing high and then slowly dipping, as if even time moves differently in this place. He stays near the edge of the mining grounds, not close enough to interfere, but not far enough to disconnect. The rhythm of the town begins to settle into him. The steady hum of machines, the crunch of boots against gravel, the unspoken understanding between people who rely on each other more than they admit. At first, he checks his watch. Out of habit, but after a while, he stops. There is no meeting waiting, no deadline pressing against his chest, just the quiet weight of waiting for someone who does not even know if she will come back to him. He sits on the same wooden bench where she left him, the grain rough beneath his fingertips, the memory of her presence still lingering in a way he cannot explain. Around him, conversations rise and fall, names are called, engines start and stop, but none of it pulls his attention away from the direction she disappeared into. For a man who has built an empire on control and precision, this kind of uncertainty should feel unbearable. Instead, it feels honest. As the sky shifts into a softer shade of gold, the workers begin to return in small groups, their movements slower now, fatigue settling into their shoulders. Faces are streaked with dust, voices lower, laughter quieter but more real. Ethan watches each group carefully, scanning without meaning to. Then he sees her. Lily walks among them, her steps steady despite the long day, her face more marked with cold dust now, but her eyes unchanged. She notices him almost immediately, a flicker of recognition crossing her expression before she approaches. You are still here, she says, not surprised, just acknowledging it. Ethan stands, brushing his hands against his jacket as if that somehow makes him more presentable. I said I would be, he replies. Lily studies him for a second, then nods slightly. Most people do not mean that when they say it. There is no accusation in her tone, just a statement shaped by experience. She sets her lunch pail down again, this time not opening it, just resting it beside her as she leans lightly against the bench. So, she continues, glancing at him from the corner of her eye. Did you find what you were looking for? The question lands softer this time, less like a test, and more like curiosity. Ethan takes a breath, considering the answer more carefully than he has considered anything in weeks. Not exactly, he admits. But I think I am closer. Lily tilts her head slightly, a hint of amusement returning. That sounds like something someone says when they do not want to admit they are lost. Ethan smiles, a real one this time, unguarded. Maybe I am. But I am. Not in a hurry to leave. For a moment, she does not respond. Instead, she looks out toward the horizon, where the last light of day stretches across the land, painting everything in warm tones that soften even the rough edges of the town. There is a diner about half a mile down the road, she says finally. Nothing special, but the food is warm. Ethan follows her gaze, then looks back at her. Are you asking me to join you? Lily pushes off the bench, picking up her lunch pail with one hand. I am giving you a chance to decide if you are serious about staying, she replies, her tone light, but her eyes steady. Then she starts walking, not waiting to see if he follows. Ethan hesitates for only a second before stepping after her, the gravel crunching beneath his shoes as he closes the distance. They walk side by side, the silence between them comfortable, filled with the sound of distant trucks and the occasional breeze carrying the scent of earth and metal. The road stretches ahead, simple and unpolished, nothing like the streets he is used to navigating. You always trust strangers this easily? He asks after a while, glancing at her. Lily lets out a quiet breath that might be a laugh. I do not trust easily, she says. I just do not judge as quickly as most people. Ethan absorbs that, the words settling somewhere deeper than he expects. That makes you different, he says. She shrugs. It makes life simpler. They reach the diner, its neon sign flickering slightly as it hums against the darkening sky. Inside, the air is warm, filled with the smell of coffee and something cooking on a grill. A few people glance up as they enter, their eyes lingering on Ethan just a second longer than necessary, noting the unfamiliar face. Lily does not react. She slides into a booth by the window, setting her lunch pail on the seat beside her. Ethan takes the seat across from her, the worn leather creaking softly. A waitress approaches, greeting Lily by name before turning her attention to Ethan with polite curiosity. Coffee, she asks. Yes. He replies, then glances at Lily. Whatever she recommends. Lily rolls her eyes slightly, but there is no irritation in it. He will have the same as me, she tells the waitress, who nods and walks away. For a moment, Ethan just watches her, the way she moves, the way she exists without trying to be anything other than herself. It is unfamiliar territory for him, and yet it feels like something he has been searching for without knowing how to name it. Why did you say yes? He asks suddenly, the question slipping out before he can filter it. Lily pauses, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of the table. She does not answer right away. Instead, she looks up at him, her gaze steady, unflinching. Because you looked at me like I was a person, she says simply. Not a background. Not a problem. Not something to fix. The words land heavier than anything he has heard all day. He feels them settle, shifting something inside him that had been quietly guarded for a long time. Most people do not do that, he asks, his voice quieter now. Lily holds his gaze for a second longer, then looks away, reaching for the glass of water the waitress just placed in front of her. Not where I come from, she says. The diner hums softly around them, conversations blending into a low murmur, the clink of dishes adding to the rhythm. Ethan leans back slightly, studying her with a new kind of awareness. There is more to her story than what he sees on the surface, more than the cold dust and the steady voice. And for the first time, he realizes that maybe what he is searching for is not just someone who says yes. Maybe it is someone who understands why that yes matters. The food arrives quicker than Ethan expects, plates sliding onto the table with a quiet efficiency that feels almost rehearsed, but not forced. The smell alone is enough to make him realize how long it has been since he last ate something that was not chosen for presentation or status. Lily does not wait. She picks up her fork and starts eating like someone who has earned every bite, focused, grounded, unapologetic. Ethan watches for a second before following her lead. The first tastes simple, but satisfying in a way that catches him off guard again. You are staring, Lily says without looking up, her tone neutral but aware. Ethan blinks, then lets out a small breath. I am learning, he replies. She glances up briefly, one eyebrow lifting slightly. About food. About people, he says, and this time, she pauses just long enough to register that he means it. The diner hums around them, but their table feels like its own quiet space, separated from the noise by something neither of them names. You said earlier that people do not usually look at you like a person. Ethan continues, his voice steady but softer now. What did you mean? Lily sets her fork down, her fingers resting lightly against the edge of her plate. For a moment, she does not answer. Instead, she studies him, like she is deciding whether the question deserves the truth. It means, she says slowly, most people see what they expect to see. Ethan leans forward slightly, listening. Out here, that usually means they see someone who works in a mine and decide that is all there is, she adds. Or they see someone like me and decide I should be grateful for whatever I get. Her voice does not carry anger. It carries something quieter, something more controlled. Ethan nods, absorbing every word. And you are not, he asks. Lily lets out a small breath that almost sounds like a laugh, but there is no humor in it. I am grateful for what I earn, she says. Not for what people think I deserve. The distinction lands clean and sharp, settling somewhere deep in Ethan's chest. Before he can respond, the bell above the diner door rings softly as someone enters. The shift in the room is subtle but noticeable. Conversations dip slightly, a few heads turn, and the energy changes just enough to register. Ethan follows Lily's gaze toward the entrance. A man steps inside, tall, well-dressed compared to everyone else in the room, his presence carrying a quiet authority that does not quite belong here. His eyes scan the diner quickly before landing on Lily. There is a flicker of recognition, followed by something else. Something colder. Evening, the man says, his voice measured as he approaches their table. Lily straightens slightly, her posture shifting in a way Ethan has not seen before. Not fear, not submission, just awareness. Evening, she replies, her tone polite but distant. The man's gaze flicks briefly to Ethan, taking him in with a quick, assessing look before returning to Lily. You are late logging your hours, he says. We keep records. For a reason. Lily's jaw tightens just enough for Ethan to notice. I finished my shift, she says calmly. I will log it tomorrow morning. The man tilts his head slightly, as if considering whether that answer satisfies him. Rules exist for a reason, he replies. Some people just forget their place. The words hang in the air, quiet but heavy. Ethan feels the shift immediately. Not just in the room, but in Lily. Her shoulders remain steady, her expression controlled, but something beneath the surface tightens. I have not forgotten anything, she says, her voice still even. The man studies her for a moment longer, then gives a small nod that does not quite feel like approval. Make sure you do not, he says before turning away and heading toward the counter. The diner slowly returns to its previous rhythm, conversations picking back up, the moment dissolving on the surface. But at their table, it lingers. Ethan looks at Lily, his expression no longer just curious. Who was that? He asks quietly. Lily picks up her fork again, but she does not eat right away. Supervisor, she says. He likes things done his way. Ethan leans back slightly, his eyes still on her. That did not sound like just work. Lily finally takes another bite, chewing slowly before answering. It usually is not, she says. The simplicity of her words carries more weight than any explanation. Ethan feels something shift again, sharper this time. Not confusion, not curiosity, something closer to clarity. He has spent years navigating power, understanding it, controlling it. But this is different. This is quieter, more personal, and somehow more revealing. You deal with that every day, he asks. Lily shrugs lightly, as if the question is too big to answer directly. You get used to it, she says. Or you learn how to stand anyway. Ethan studies her, the way she holds herself, the way she refuses to shrink even when the world around her expects it. And you chose to say yes to me, he says, almost to himself. Lily looks up at him again, her gaze steady. I chose to give you a chance, she corrects. That is different. The words settle between them, quiet but undeniable. Ethan nods slowly, understanding more than he did before. Not just about her. About everything. The diner lights flicker slightly as the night deepens outside. The world beyond the window fading into darkness, while their table remains lit, steady, real. And for the first time since this began, Ethan realizes that what he is seeing here is not just kindness. It is strength. The kind that does not announce itself. The kind that does not need validation. The kind that, once recognized, cannot be ignored. The bell above the diner door rings again as someone leaves, and for a moment the cold night air slips inside, brushing against Ethan's skin like a reminder that this place does not soften itself for anyone. He watches Lily as she finishes her meal, her movements calm, deliberate, like she has learned to hold her ground without needing to prove it. There is something in the way she exists that feels unshakable, and it unsettles him in a way he cannot ignore. Does it ever get tiring? He asks quietly, his fingers tracing the edge of his coffee cup, now half empty and gone cold. Lily does not look up right away. She wipes her hands with a napkin, then folds it neatly, placing it beside her plate before answering. What part? She asks. Ethan exhales slightly, searching for the right words. Having to stand your ground all the time, he says. Having to prove you belong. Lily leans back in her seat, her eyes meeting his with a steadiness that does not waver. You think I am trying to prove something? She asks. Ethan hesitates, then shakes his head slightly. No, he admits. I think you already know where you stand. A faint shift crosses her expression, something softer, but it disappears almost instantly. Then it is not about proving anything, she says. It is about not letting anyone decide it for me. The words settle into the space between them, quiet but firm. Ethan nods slowly, feeling the weight of them. In his world, power is loud, visible, reinforced by numbers and titles. Here, it is different. Here, it is quiet, carried in posture, in tone, in the refusal to bend when it would be easier to do so. The waitress returns with the check, placing it gently on the table without interrupting their rhythm. Ethan reaches for it instinctively, but Lily's hand moves first, sliding it closer to her side. "We split," she says simply. Ethan pauses, his hand hovering for a second before pulling back. "I invited you," he says. Lily shakes her head, already reaching into her pocket. "No," she replies. "You showed up. That is not the same thing." There is no challenge in her voice, just a boundary, clear and non-negotiable. Ethan watches as she places her share on the table, exact down to the last dollar, then looks back at him. "If you are serious about staying," she adds, "you should learn that people here pay their own way." Ethan nods, a small smile forming as he places his portion beside hers. "I am starting to understand that," he says. They step outside together, the night now fully settled, the sky stretched wide and dark above them, scattered with stars that are barely visible in the city but clear and sharp here. The air is cooler, carrying a quiet that feels heavier than silence. For a moment, they stand side by side, neither rushing to leave. "So," Lily says, adjusting her jacket slightly, "what now?" The question is simple, but it carries more than just the moment. Ethan looks down the road, then back at her. "I keep going," he says. "At least until I know I am not wasting my time." Lily studies him, her gaze searching, not for answers, but for consistency. "And how will you know that?" she asks. Ethan lets out a quiet breath, his shoulders relaxing just slightly. "When someone stops seeing me as a question," he says. Lily tilts her head, considering that. "You might be asking the wrong thing," she replies. Ethan frowns slightly, not in disagreement, but in curiosity. "Then what should I be asking?" Lily looks at him for a long second, the kind that stretches just enough to matter. "Not who will say yes to you," she says, "but who you are when someone does." The words land deeper than anything else she has said so far. Ethan feels them settle, shifting something inside him that has been quietly holding on to control. Before he can respond, a truck passes by, its headlights briefly illuminating them both before fading into the distance. Lily takes a step back, creating just a little more space between them. "I have an early shift," she says. 5:30 in the morning. Ethan nods, committing the detail to memory without thinking. "Then I will not keep you," he replies. She gives a small nod, then turns to leave, her steps steady, unhurried. After a few feet, she stops and looks back at him again. "You are not from here," she says. It is not a question. Ethan meets her gaze. "No," he admits. Lily studies him one last time, as if deciding whether to push further. Then she shakes her head slightly. "Then do not pretend to be," she says. "Just be honest about why you are staying." With that, she turns and walks away, her figure gradually blending into the quiet rhythm of the town until she disappears from view. Ethan remains where he is, the night stretching around him, her words echoing louder than the silence. "Do not pretend. Be honest." He exhales slowly, running a hand through his hair as he looks up at the sky, the vastness of it suddenly feeling less distant than it did before. For the first time since he started this journey, he feels the weight of something he has been avoiding. Not rejection, not failure, but truth. And standing there alone on that quiet road, with nothing but the sound of distant engines and the memory of her voice, Ethan realizes that the next step is not about finding someone who will say yes. It is about deciding whether he is ready to show who he really is when it matters most. At 5:20 in the morning, the town feels like it is holding its breath. The sky is still dark, a deep blue stretched thin across the horizon, and the air carries a cold that settles into the bones before the sun has a chance to rise. Ethan stands near the edge of the mining site, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets, his breath visible in short, quiet bursts. He has not slept much, not because of discomfort, but because his mind refused to settle after everything Lily said. "Do not pretend. Be honest." The words have been repeating in his head, not as pressure, but as a question he has not yet answered. Around him, the town slowly begins to wake. Engines start, lights flicker on in small buildings, and workers arrive in steady lines, their movements automatic, practiced. There is no hesitation here. No second guessing. Just routine built from necessity. Ethan watches them, noticing details he would have missed before. The way people nod to each other without stopping. The way they carry their weight without complaint. The way no one is trying to be seen, and yet everything about them is real. Then he sees her. Lily walks toward the entrance, her steps firm, her posture straight despite the early hour. Her hair is pulled back, her jacket zipped up against the cold, and her hands already marked with traces of the work she is about to do. She does not notice him at first, and for a moment, Ethan just watches, taking in the version of her that exists without him there. Unfiltered, unaware, strong in a way that does not ask for recognition. He takes a step forward. "You start early," he says, his voice breaking the quiet just enough for her to hear. Lily turns, surprise flickering across her face before it settles into something more neutral. "You are still here," she says, echoing her words from the day before, but this time with a hint of curiosity beneath them. Ethan nods. "I said I would stay," he replies. She studies him for a second, her gaze sharper in the morning light, as if the lack of distractions makes it easier to see through things. "Most people change their mind after a night out here," she says. Ethan shifts slightly, the gravel crunching under his feet. "I am not most people," he answers. Lily lets out a small breath, not quite a laugh, but not dismissive either. "We will see," she says. For a moment, they stand there, the space between them filled with the low hum of machines coming to life. Ethan glances toward the mine entrance, the darkness below stretching deeper than it did yesterday. "Can I come down there?" he asks suddenly. The question lands differently than he expects. Lily's expression changes, not in shock, but in assessment. She looks at him like she is measuring something he has not yet proven. "Why would you want to?" she asks. Ethan takes a breath, choosing his words more carefully this time. "Because I do not want to just watch," he says. "I want to understand." Lily holds his gaze, her eyes searching for something beyond the surface of his answer. "Understanding is not something you get in a few hours," she says. "It takes time. It takes showing up when it is not convenient." Ethan nods slowly. "Then I will show up," he replies. The certainty in his voice is quieter now, less about proving a point and more about stating a decision. Lily looks at him for a long second, then glances toward the entrance again. "You would not last an hour down there," she says, not as an insult, but as a fact. Ethan almost smiles. "Then I will start with 10 minutes, he says. A faint shift crosses her face, something that might be respect, but she does not confirm it. Instead, she adjusts her gloves, pulling them tighter over her hands. "You do not need to go underground to understand people," she says. "You just need to listen when they speak." The words land, simple but deliberate. Ethan nods again, taking a step back as if giving her space. "Then I will start there," he says. Lily studies him one last time, then gives a small nod. "Good," she replies. "Because this place does not need more people trying to prove something. It needs people who know why they are here." The statement lingers between them, heavier than it sounds. Before Ethan can respond, the same supervisor from the night before approaches, his presence cutting through the moment like a shift in temperature. His eyes move from Lily to Ethan, narrowing slightly as recognition settles in. "You again," he says, his tone measured but edged with something sharper. Lily straightens slightly, her posture firm. "He is just passing through," she says before Ethan can speak. The supervisor's gaze lingers on Ethan, assessing, dismissing, calculating all at once. "This is not a place for tourists," he replies. Ethan meets his gaze, calm, unshaken. "I am not here for a tour," he says. The supervisor tilts his head slightly, as if deciding how much attention to give that answer. "Then make sure you are not in the way," he says before turning back to Lily. "We start in 5 minutes." Lily nods once, then looks back at Ethan. There is something different in her expression now. Not just curiosity, not just caution, something that feels closer to recognition. "If you are still here tonight," she says, her voice quieter, "we can talk again." It is not an invitation. Not exactly. But it is not a dismissal either. Ethan nods, understanding the weight of it. "I will be here," he replies. Lily holds his gaze for a second longer, then turns and walks toward the entrance, her figure gradually blending into the movement of workers and machinery. Ethan remains where he is, the cold air pressing against him, the early light beginning to stretch across the horizon. And as the first hints of sunrise break through the darkness, he realizes that for the first time, staying is no longer part of an experiment. It is a choice. You think staying is the hard part, the old mechanic says without looking up, his voice rough but steady as he wipes his hands on a faded rag. But it is what you see after that decides everything. Ethan hears the words before he fully notices the man, standing just outside a small repair shed near the edge of the mining site. The sun has climbed higher now, burning off the early morning chill, replacing it with a dry heat that settles into the dust and metal around him. Ethan steps closer, drawn not just by the voice, but by the quiet certainty behind it. "What do you mean?" he asks. The mechanic glances at him briefly, his eyes sharp despite the years etched into his face. "I mean," he says, setting the rag down and leaning back against the workbench, "people come through places like this all the time. They say they are looking for something real. But when real shows up, they do not always recognize it." Ethan nods slowly, the words hitting closer than he expected. "And what does real look like to you?" he asks. The mechanic lets out a low breath, almost a laugh, but without humor. "It looks like people who do not change depending on who is watching," he says. "It looks like showing up even when nobody is keeping score." He gestures vaguely toward the mine, where workers continue their steady rhythm. "Out there, nobody cares what you say you are. They care what you do when it matters." Ethan follows his gaze, watching as figures move in and out of the entrance, each one carrying their own weight without announcement. "You talking about Lily?" he asks before he can stop himself. The mechanic's eyes flick back to him, something knowing passing through them. "I am talking about anyone who has nothing to hide," he replies. "But if you noticed her, then you are paying attention." Ethan shifts slightly, the gravel crunching under his feet again. "She is hard not to notice," he admits. The mechanic studies him for a moment, then nods once, as if confirming something he has already decided. "Then here is the part most people miss," he says. "Seeing someone is easy. Understanding them is where people fail." The words settle into Ethan's chest, heavier than the heat pressing down around him. Before he can respond, a distant horn echoes from the mining site, signaling a shift change. The mechanic straightens, picking up his tools again. "If you are still here tonight," he adds without looking back, "you might start to understand what you are actually dealing with." Ethan watches him for a second longer, then turns his attention back toward the mine, the rhythm of the place pulling him in without asking permission. Hours pass differently now. He does not count them. He does not check his watch. Instead, he moves through the edges of the town, observing, listening, letting the details build into something larger. He sees how people speak less, but mean more. How respect is earned quietly, without announcement. How no one here is trying to be impressive, and yet everything about their lives carries weight. By late afternoon, the light softens again, stretching long shadows across the ground as the heat begins to fade. Ethan finds himself back near the same bench, not by plan, but by instinct. The place feels familiar now, like a marker in a story he is only beginning to understand. And then, just like before, she appears. Lily walks toward him, her pace steady, her expression unreadable at first glance. But there is something different now, not in how she carries herself, but in how she looks at him. Less distant, more aware. "You stayed," she says, her voice even, but carrying a note of something quieter beneath it. Ethan stands, meeting her halfway this time instead of waiting. "I told you I would," he replies. Lily studies him, her eyes moving over him as if searching for signs of something she cannot quite name. "Most people say things," she says. "Not many follow through." Ethan nods slightly. "I am starting to understand that matters here." She tilts her head, considering him again. "It matters everywhere," she says. "People just forget." They stand there for a moment, the space between them no longer uncertain, but not fully settled either. "So," she continues, crossing her arms lightly, "what did you learn today?" The question is direct, but not confrontational. Ethan takes a breath, choosing honesty over anything else. "That I have been looking at the wrong things," he says. Lily raises an eyebrow slightly. "Meaning?" Ethan glances toward the mine, then back at her. "I thought I needed to find someone who would choose me," he explains. "But I think I need to figure out who I am when that happens." Lily holds his gaze, the silence stretching just long enough to matter. Then, Slowly she nods. That is a better question, she says. The approval is subtle, but it lands stronger than anything else she could have said. A truck passes nearby, the sound breaking the moment just enough to remind them where they are. Lily shifts her weight slightly, her posture relaxing just a fraction. There is a spot up the ridge, she says after a second. About a 10-minute walk. You can see the whole town from there. Ethan follows her gesture, looking toward the slope that rises just beyond the buildings. You taking me there? He asks. Lily turns slightly, already starting to move. If you can keep up, she replies. There is no challenge in her tone, just a quiet invitation wrapped in honesty. Ethan does not hesitate this time. He steps forward, falling into pace beside her as they move away from the noise of the town and towards something quieter, something higher. And as the ground shifts beneath his feet, the air cooling slightly with each step upward, Ethan realizes that whatever he thought this journey would be, it is already becoming something else entirely. The path up the ridge is steeper than it looks, loose gravel shifting under Ethan's shoes with every step, forcing him to slow down just enough to stay balanced. Lily moves ahead of him with ease, her pace steady, her footing sure like she has walked this path more times than she can count. The distance between them stretches and closes in quiet rhythm, not because she is trying to lead, but because she does not wait for anyone to catch up. Ethan notices that. He adjusts, not by asking her to slow down, but by learning how to move differently. By the time they reach the top, the town below spreads out in a way that changes everything. The roads, the small buildings, all of it framed by the fading light of the evening sun. It is not impressive in the way cities are. It is not designed to be admired. But from up here, it feels complete. Lily walks to the edge of the ridge, stopping just short of where the ground drops off into a slope of rock and dirt. She sets her hands on her hips, looking out over the town like she is checking on something that belongs to her, without ever claiming it. Ethan steps beside her, his breath slightly heavier, but his focus sharp. You see it differently from up here, he says quietly. Lily nods once. Everything looks different when you stop standing in the middle of it, she replies. The wind picks up slightly, carrying the scent of earth and metal, softer now with distance. For a moment, neither of them speaks. The silence feels earned, not empty. That is where I grew up, Lily says after a while, pointing toward a small cluster of houses near the edge of town. 2 bedrooms, 5 people, 1 bathroom that never stayed fixed for long. Ethan follows her gesture, trying to picture it, but realizing quickly that imagining is not the same as knowing. You still live there? He asks. Lily shakes her head. No, she says. I moved out when I started working full-time. Got a place closer to the site. She pauses, then adds, it is not much, but it is mine. The way she says it carries a quiet pride that does not need explanation. Ethan nods, understanding more than he expected. You built your own way, he says. Lily glances at him, her expression neutral but attentive. Everyone here does, she replies. There is no other option. Ethan lets that settle, the simplicity of it carrying more weight than any complicated explanation. Back where I am from, he says slowly. People talk about building something all the time, but most of them start with more than they admit. Lily studies him for a second, then looks back out at the town. And you? She asks. What did you start with? The question lands differently than anything else she has asked so far. It is not about curiosity. It is about truth. Ethan exhales, the air leaving him slower this time. More than most, he admits. But not in the way people think. Lily waits, not pushing, not filling the silence. Just giving him space to continue if he chooses. I learned early how to make things grow, he says. How to turn something small into something bigger. But somewhere along the way, I stopped asking why I was doing it. Lily nods slightly, as if that answer makes sense to her. That happens, she says. People get used to moving forward without checking if they are going in the right direction. Ethan lets out a small breath that almost turns into a laugh. That sounds like you have seen it before. Lily shrugs. I have seen people chase things that do not see them back, she says. The words land quietly, but they stay. The sun dips lower, casting longer shadows across the town, the light turning warmer, softer. Ethan glances at her, noticing how the fading sunlight catches the edges of her features, highlighting the strength in them without softening anything. You ever think about leaving? He asks. Lily does not answer right away. She watches the town for a few seconds longer, then shakes her head slightly. Leaving is easy, she says. Knowing where to go after that is not. Ethan nods, the truth of that settling deeper than he expected. So you stay, he says. I stay because I know who I am here, she replies. Out there, I would have to prove it again. The statement is simple, but it carries a weight Ethan cannot ignore. He thinks about the world he came from, how easily identity is built on perception, on what people see first instead of what is actually there. You should not have to prove it anywhere, he says. Lily turns to him, her gaze steady, not defensive, just real. Maybe, she says. But that is not how it works. The wind shifts again, cooler now as the sun sinks further. A quiet settles between them, not uncomfortable, but reflective. So why did you really come here? She asks after a moment. Not the version you gave me before. The real reason. Ethan looks out over the town, the question pressing against something he has been holding back. For a second, he considers giving her a simpler answer, something easier to accept. But her words from the night before echo again. Do not pretend. Be honest. Because I was tired of people choosing something that was not me, he says finally. Lily watches him closely, her expression unreadable. And you think coming here changes that? She asks. Ethan shakes his head slightly. I think it changes me, he says. The honesty in his voice is quieter now, but stronger. Lily holds his gaze for a long second, then looks back out at the town, the last light of the day fading into the horizon. That might be the first real thing you have said, she replies softly. The words are not praise. They are recognition. And somehow, that matters more. As the sky darkens and the first hints of night begin to settle over the town below, Ethan realizes that this place, this moment, this conversation, is no longer part of a search. It is part of something deeper, something that does not ask for validation, but demands truth. And standing there beside her, looking out at a world that finally feels honest, he understands that whatever comes next will depend on whether he is ready to stop holding anything back. The last light of the sun disappears behind the ridge, leaving the town below wrapped in a dim glow of scattered streetlights and distant machinery still humming like a heartbeat that never fully rests. For a moment, neither Ethan nor Lily moves. The silence between them feels heavier now, not because it is empty, but because it holds everything that has not been said yet. Then Lily steps back from the edge, brushing her hands lightly against her jeans as if grounding herself again. We should head down, she says, her voice returning to something more practical. Ethan nods, though his eyes linger on the horizon for a second longer before he turns to follow her. The path down feels different. Not just because the light is gone, but because something has shifted between them. The distance that once felt uncertain now feels intentional, measured, like both of them are aware that whatever this is, it matters enough to move carefully. They walk in quiet rhythm, their footsteps sinking without effort, the gravel crunching softly beneath them. Halfway down, the sound of an engine cuts through the stillness, louder than anything else around them. Headlights sweep across the slope, bright and sharp, forcing Ethan to squint slightly. A black SUV pulls up near the base of the ridge, its presence out of place against the worn edges of the town. Lily slows, her posture tightening just slightly as she takes in the vehicle. That is not from around here, she says under her breath. Ethan feels it before he fully processes it. The shift in energy, the familiarity of something he has been avoiding. The SUV door opens, and a man steps out, dressed in a tailored suit that stands in stark contrast to everything around him. His eyes lock onto Ethan immediately. Mr. Cole, the man calls out, his voice carrying easily through the quiet. The name hangs in the air, cutting through the space between Ethan and Lily like a line drawn too clearly to ignore. Lily stops walking. Completely. Slowly, she turns her head toward Ethan, her expression no longer neutral. Not confused. Not surprised. Something sharper. Something that demands clarity. Ethan exhales, the moment he has been holding off finally arriving without asking permission. The man approaches, his steps confident, controlled. We have been trying to reach you, he continues. The board meeting is in less than 12 hours. The investors are already asking questions. Ethan does not respond right away. His attention is no longer on the man. It is on Lily, on the way she is looking at him now, not seeing him differently, but seeing more than he chose to show. You should not have come here, Ethan says quietly, his voice steady but firm. The man pauses, glancing briefly at Lily before returning his focus to Ethan. With all due respect, sir, this is not optional, he replies. There are decisions that cannot wait. The words sound familiar. Too familiar. They belong to a world Ethan stepped away from, but never truly left. Lily takes a small step back, her arms crossing over her chest, not in defense, but in distance. Mr. Cole, she repeats, the name sounding different in her voice, heavier, more defined. Ethan closes his eyes for half a second, then opens them again, meeting her gaze directly. I was going to tell you, he says. The honesty is there, but so is the weight of timing. Lily studies him, her expression unreadable, but her eyes sharper than before. When? She asks. The single word carries more than a full sentence ever could. Ethan does not look away. Soon, he answers. Lily lets out a slow breath, not loud, not dramatic, but enough to signal that something has shifted. That is not an answer, she says. Ethan nods slightly. You are right, he admits. The man beside him clears his throat, the interruption subtle but deliberate. Sir, we really need to leave, he says. Now. Ethan does not move. Not yet. Lily glances between them, taking in the difference in posture, in tone, in everything that has not been explained. So this is who you are, she says finally. It is not a question. It is a realization. Ethan takes a step toward her, but stops himself before closing the distance completely. It is part of who I am, he says. Lily's gaze does not soften. And the part you showed me, she asks. Was that real? The question lands exactly where it is meant to. Ethan does not hesitate this time. Yes, he says. That is the part one was trying to hold on to. Lily holds his gaze for a long second, searching, measuring, deciding. The silence stretches, filled with everything that cannot be undone. Then she nods once, slow, controlled. Then you should have trusted me with the truth, she says. The words are not loud. They do not need to be. Ethan feels them settle deeper than anything else she has said. He takes another step forward, this time closing the distance just enough to make it clear he is not walking away. I did not know if you would see me the same, he admits. Lily's expression shifts, just slightly, not into anger, but into something more grounded. That was not your choice to make, she replies. The statement is simple, but it carries the kind of clarity that leaves no room for argument. Behind them, the SUV engine idles, the man waiting. The world Ethan came from pressing closer with every passing second. Lily steps back again, creating space where there was none before. You should go, she says. Ethan does not move. Lily, he starts, but she shakes her head gently, cutting him off. You have a world waiting for you, she says. Do not keep it standing because of me. The words sound like permission, but they feel like distance. Ethan stands there for a moment longer, caught between two versions of his life, both real, both demanding something from him. Then, slowly he nods. Not because he agrees, but because he understands that this moment is not something he can force to stay. He turns toward the SUV, the sound of his footsteps heavier now, each one carrying the weight of what he is leaving unfinished. As he reaches the door, he pauses, glancing back one last time. Lily is still there, standing on the slope, her figure steady against the darkening sky. Not waiting, not stopping him, just standing in her truth. And for the first time since he started this journey, Ethan realizes that saying yes was never the hardest part. It is what comes after the truth that decides everything. The door of the SUV closes with a soft, controlled sound that feels louder than it should, sealing Ethan inside a world he thought he could step away from. As the vehicle pulls away from the ridge, the town begins to shrink in the rear window, its lights dimming into scattered points against the dark. Ethan does not look away immediately. His eyes remain fixed on the spot where Lily stood, her figure already gone from sight, but not from his mind. You should have informed us of your location, the man in the front seat says, his tone professional, measured, as if the past 48 hours never happened. There are protocols for situations like this. Ethan leans back slightly, his gaze finally shifting forward, but his thoughts still anchored somewhere behind him. It was not a situation, he replies quietly. It was a choice. The man pauses for a second, adjusting his grip on the steering wheel. With all due respect, sir, choices at your level tend to affect more than just yourself, he says. Ethan does not respond. He already knows that. He has built his entire life around that truth. Every decision calculated, every move weighed against outcomes and consequences. But for the first time, he realizes that none of those calculations ever accounted for something like this. Something that does not fit into numbers or projections. The road stretches ahead, the headlights cutting through the darkness in a steady beam, the silence inside the car heavier than any conversation. Ethan reaches into his pocket, his fingers brushing against something soft. He pulls it out slowly. The folded napkin from the diner. He stares at it for a moment, remembering the way Lily placed it beside her plate, the way everything she did carried intention, even in the smallest details. He turns it over in his hands, the simplicity of it grounding him in a way nothing else has since he left. We have the presentation ready. The man continues, filling the silence again. The investors are expecting you to finalize the expansion plan. There are also concerns about the new mining site acquisition. Ethan's eyes narrow slightly, the words pulling him back into a reality he knows too well. Which site? He asks. The one in West Ridge, the man replies. It is a smaller operation, but the land has potential. The current workforce will likely need restructuring. The words land differently now. Not as strategy, not as opportunity, but as something else entirely. Ethan's grip on the napkin tightens, just slightly. West Ridge. He knows exactly where that is. He has seen it from above, walked its roads, sat in its diner, met the people who live and work there. Restructuring how? He asks, his voice lower now. The man hesitates for a fraction of a second, then answers. Efficiency adjustments, he says. Reducing overhead. Replacing certain roles. Standard procedure. Ethan looks out the window, the passing landscape blurring into something indistinct. Standard procedure. The phrase echoes in his mind, but it no longer feels neutral. It feels distant, detached from the reality he just experienced. And the people? He asks. What happens to them? The man glances at him through the rearview mirror, his expression carefully neutral. There are always transitions in these situations, he replies. It is part of maintaining growth. Ethan exhales slowly, the air leaving him heavier this time. Growth. Efficiency. Transition. Words he has used countless times, each one carrying meaning in boardrooms, in presentations, in decisions that shaped entire operations. But now, they feel incomplete. Because for the first time, he can see what those words look like on the ground. He can see the faces behind them. Lily's face. Her steady voice. The way she said, "It is mine." The SUV continues down the highway, the distance between him and the town stretching further with every mile. But instead of creating separation, it sharpens something inside him. Cancel the restructuring proposal, Ethan says suddenly. The man in the front seat stiffens slightly. Until I review it personally. The man hesitates, clearly not expecting that response. That will delay the timeline, he says. The investors will adjust. Ethan interrupts, his tone calm but firm. Or they can find someone else to run the company. The silence that follows is immediate and absolute. The man nods once, slowly, understanding that the decision is not open for discussion. Understood, he says. Ethan leans back again, his gaze returning to the window. The reflection staring back at him is sharper now, more defined. Not just the version of him that exists in boardrooms, but the one that stood on a ridge, listening instead of speaking, learning instead of deciding. He unfolds the napkin carefully, smoothing it out against his palm. It is nothing special. Just paper. Just something small and easily overlooked. But to him, it feels like proof. Proof that something real happened. That he did not imagine it. That the person he was trying to hold on to is not gone. The city lights begin to appear in the distance, growing brighter with every passing minute, pulling him back into the world he knows how to navigate. But this time, something is different. He is not returning as the same man who left. And as the SUV crosses the line where the quiet of the town gives way to the noise of the city, Ethan realizes that the next move is no longer about choosing between two worlds. It is about deciding which version of himself he is willing to be when they collide. Numbers do not lie, Mr. Cole. The voice is sharp, controlled, and perfectly timed to cut through the low murmur of the boardroom. Ethan does not look up immediately. His fingers rest lightly against the polished surface of the long table, the reflection beneath them clear enough to show a version of himself that feels both familiar and distant. Around him, executives sit in tailored suits, screens glowing with charts, projections, and neatly packaged conclusions. The city stretches behind the glass walls, towering and precise, a world built on decisions like the one they are about to make. The West Ridge site is underperforming, another voice adds, calm but firm. If we restructure now, we can increase output by at least 30% within 6 months. Ethan finally lifts his gaze, his eyes moving from one speaker to the next. He has heard these arguments before. He has made them himself. But now, they sound different. Not incorrect, just incomplete. And the workforce? He asks, his tone even, giving nothing away. There is a brief pause, subtle but noticeable. One of the executives shifts slightly in his seat. We would streamline operations, he says. Retain key personnel, release redundant roles. Standard efficiency measures. Ethan leans back slowly, his eyes narrowing just enough to signal that he is not satisfied with the answer. How many people? He asks. The room stills for half a second. Then, quietly, approximately 40%. The number lands without emotion. Just data. Just a percentage. But Ethan sees something else entirely. He sees a diner booth. A folded napkin. A woman who said she built something that was hers. He sees faces that do not exist in spreadsheets. And what happens to them? He asks again, his voice quieter now, but carrying more weight. They transition, someone replies. We can offer severance packages, relocation options where applicable. Ethan nods once, slowly, as if considering it. Then he reaches into his jacket pocket and pulls out the folded napkin, placing it on the table in front of him. The gesture is small, almost insignificant in a room filled with multi-million-dollar decisions. But it shifts something. Not in the numbers. In the attention. A few eyes flicker toward it, confused, uncertain. Do you know what this is? Ethan asks. No one answers. Of course they do not. It is nothing, he continues. It is not complete. The distinction lands clearly. No raised voices. No confrontation. Just a line drawn where there was none before. We are not restructuring that site, Ethan says. We are investing in it. The words settle into the room, heavier than any projection. We improve conditions. We support the workforce. We build something sustainable instead of cutting it down for short-term gain. The silence that follows is no longer neutral. It is charged, calculating. That will reduce immediate returns, someone points out carefully. Ethan nods. Yes, he says. It will. Another pause. But it will increase long-term stability, he adds. And more importantly, it aligns with the kind of company we claim to be. The statement is simple, but it shifts the conversation in a way no chart could. For a moment, no one speaks. Then, slowly, one of the board members leans back, considering. This is a significant change in direction, he says. Ethan meets his gaze without hesitation. It is a correction, he replies. The distinction is subtle, but it holds. The tension in the room does not disappear, but it changes. It becomes something that can be worked with instead of pushed against. After a few seconds, the same board member nods once. We will need a revised plan, he says. Ethan allows a small breath to leave him, not relief, but confirmation. You will have it, he replies. The meeting continues, shifting into new discussions, new strategies, but Ethan's focus drifts just enough to notice the reflection of the napkin still resting on the table. It looks out of place here. Simple, unremarkable, real. When the meeting finally ends, the room empties slowly, voices returning to normal, the weight of the decision settling into action. The voice follows him before he even reaches the elevator, sharp enough to stop most people mid-step. But Ethan does not stop. Not immediately. He presses the button, watching the numbers above the door glow softly as they descend, his reflection faintly visible in the polished metal. I am not rewriting them, he says calmly. I am deciding which ones we should have followed in the first place. The man steps closer, his expression controlled but tighter than before. Investors do not see it that way, he replies. They see risk. Ethan turns then, fully, meeting his gaze without hesitation. They always do, he says. Until someone shows them what they are missing. The elevator doors slide open with a quiet chime, and Ethan steps inside, without waiting for a response. Nods again, making a quick note before stepping aside. Is there anything else you need? She asks. Ethan pauses, the question landing differently than it usually does. For a moment, He considers the list of things he would normally say. Schedules, reports, updates. But none of them feel relevant right now. No, he says finally. I know where I need to be. Without another word, he walks toward the exit, the automatic doors sliding open as he approaches, the city air meeting him with a rush of sound and movement, not distance. I told you I would come back, he says, his voice steady, carrying more than just the words. Keeps it in his hand, grounded by it. I chose not to turn this place into numbers on a report, he says. Step closer, not closing the distance completely, but enough to make it clear he is not standing on the edge anymore. And you, he asks. What happens for you now? Lily considers that, her gaze shifting briefly toward the horizon before returning to him. I keep doing what I have been doing, she says.